Welcome to the Microsoft Partner Network Thought Leader Podcast series. Today, we talk with Tim Hurson, author of Think Better, An Innovator's Guide to Productive Thinking, which has been translated into 9 languages and is used in business schools throughout the world. He's also the author of Never Be Closing, How to Sell Better Without Screwing Your Clients, Your Colleagues, or Yourself, which was named by the Oprah Winfrey Network as one of the 15 best self-improvement books of 2015. In part 1 of this 2-part episode, Tim looks at the tools, processes, and approaches that can put thought structure into practice to help generate more ideas and make better decisions with your clients and in your businesses.
So welcome to Tim Hurson.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you so much for joining me today. Tim, you've been involved in creativity and innovation for most of your career. It seems like you've shifted focus a little bit. Can you tell us where that shift is leading you now?
Well, I think, one of the interesting things about the creative bunch, and by the creative bunch, I'm talking about people who deal with ideation techniques, people who get involved in innovation processes, and so on and so forth, we often talk about that. We use that awful phrase, outside the box or inside the box, depending on which way you look at it. And I came to realize that we actually have put ourselves in a box. Over the years, people have developed a range of tools and philosophies, principles, approaches to thinking, because it's all about how well you think. And we've been inside that creative problem-solving box, that innovation box. And a couple of years ago, it occurred to me that the tools that have been developed, many of them, are really much more universal than just in that box. And that they might be applicable to, my second book, for example, is about sales. Might be applicable beyond sales to strategic investigations. Might be applicable beyond that, in fact, to family matters. And I've been experimenting with that and playing around with these tools and modifying them, obviously, somewhat in order to do that. And I've discovered that really what they are is not a bunch of creativity tools, not a bunch of strategic tools. They're actually life skills. And they're things that almost anyone can use in a wide variety of situations to do better. So that's the genesis of this thing. And my sense is that if we can take these tools out into the world, there are countless fields and countless people who could benefit by those simple things. And here's the thing, they're so simple. It's just that people tend not to do them.
Excellent. So what kind of tools are we talking about?
Well, let me take a step back from tools and talk first about principles. Because all of the tools work not so much within a framework, but they are supported by a set of principles. And there's a bunch, but I'm going to list 3. One is the principle of lists. And I know that doesn't sound like a really deep principle, but I said this stuff was simple. So. Another one is the principle of structure. And a third one is a principle of deferred judgment. So we've got these 3 principles. Let me start with the principle of structure. So human beings do things well because we have developed structures through which to do them. We are better athletes because we know how to train. And we have developed regimens that allow us to improve our performance, whether it's golf or marathons or whatever it is. Any athlete knows that there's a system or a structure that you have to employ. Musicians do the same thing. There's hardly a field of human endeavor that doesn't rely, we're on structure. We're in this amazingly big building. Well, people don't just pour sand on the ground and a building appears. There's design, there's plan, there's structure. And yet, when it comes to most kinds of thinking, not all, but most kinds of thinking, people don't use structure at all. They just sort of grab ideas and opinions from the ether, from the sky. And if you could impose, and it is kind of an imposition, structure on the way we think, in the same way that we impose structure on a golf swing, Wouldn't it be interesting? Because here's the funny thing. Everybody says, and if they don't say it, they think it, I think as well as I can. Like there's this inherent belief that we were born with this brain, and some people are smart, and some people are not smart, and some people are creative, and some people are not creative. It's nonsense. Who would say about their golf game, I play the best game of golf I can? Nobody. Because everybody knows you can get better. How do you get better? Through structure. So first principle is that if we impose often very simple structures on our thinking, we can do better. Second principle is the principle of lists. So those people who are involved in strategic planning again and innovation and creative thinking, they're used to lists. You know, you got those flip charts full of lists and Post-it notes and all of that stuff. And then listing is part of the process. And yet, when you go home, for example, and you want to think about a simple domestic decision, or you want to decide on a vacation plan, or you're having an argument and you're trying to come up with a reasonable position, you don't make lists. You make them in your head. Well, that's kind of okay, except for the fact that we can't keep a whole lot of things in our head. You know, there's that old myth, and it is a myth, that the most number of things that we can keep in our head at one time is 7. It's actually slightly lower statistically. But imagine that. Imagine throwing away all those flip charts, which are, maybe boring but useful, and relying on only the 5 ideas that actually can stay in your mind at one time. You're really limiting yourself astonishingly by doing that. So just making lists is useful. And then the final one, the thing about deferring judgment, is, I want to come back to that later. So now let's tie that together and with some tools. So what's the simplest tool that you can use? And I said they were simple. The simplest possible tool you can use is make that list. If I have a variety of options, or I have a decision to make which might involve a variety of options, just listing what those options are will, first of all, relieve me from, that limit of 5 to 7 things that I can remember. And as I write them down, what will happen is I'll automatically be stimulated. Automatically. It's like you don't even have to do it to write another thing, because something will remind you of something else. You'll see visually. We're visual creatures. You'll see visually something that stimulates you to write another idea. So suddenly you'll have a list, not of those 4 or 5 things that you can actually remember, but a list of, maybe 8 or 9 things. Not too bad. Suddenly we just by doing that, we've doubled the amount. And you can think of all kinds of situations where that might be useful. And here's the other thing. It takes no time. It actually takes, very, very little time. So just forget structure. Just by the list, you have increased your options. Now impose structure, and you begin to have what we sometimes think of as a tool. So let's take that list and structure it in a particular way. One of my favorite tools, and one which many of my colleagues used, I developed it, 15 years ago. And I developed it kind of as an afterthought, as a side thing, and started to use it, and I saw what happened when people used it, and it was almost miraculous. It's called No Wonder. And all you do is you divide your paper into 2 lists, not just 1, but 2. And on the one side, you write down all the things you know about this particular issue. Now, you may be wrong whether you know them or not important. Just write down. And so now you've got 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 things that you know about this issue that you have to decide on. On the other side of the list, you write down all the things that you don't know, that maybe you should know. And that's your list of wonders. So know and wonder. Now suddenly you probably have not those 10 or 12 that we talked about earlier, but now there's 24. And guess what? Every single wonder usually has a question mark behind it. So it in turn stimulates you to think about more issues that either you're going to have to research or you're going to have to understand better, or they will lead you in a particular way down a variety of paths. So what we've done is we've combined the most simple kind of list with a most simple kind of structure, just 2 columns, and suddenly the world changes. And I'm not exaggerating. The world changes for you and the people around you. So now imagine that you have this super simple list, and instead of doing it with 1 person, you do it with 2 people. So you and a colleague write down all the things you know and all the things you wonder, and you're going to know different things. And in fact, you might even disagree about what you know. And sometimes what you wonder about, your colleague might know the answer to or a direction, and vice versa. So suddenly there's a cauldron of chemicals brewing here, which allows you to have even more information and more perspective and more depth on the issue. We've still just done it the most simple thing. List, 2 columns. That's it. We all have, we have this phrase that we use, which is, let's get on the same page. What a great way to be on the same page. Ever been to a meeting where you thought you were on the same page and you weren't? Here's just a simple way to not ensure, because guarantees are hard to come by, but to make it a lot more likely that you and the 1 person that you're working with are not just figuratively on the same page, but literally on the same page. You can take that and multiply it again, a couple of groups of 2, and now you have different perspectives and so on. So there's an example of combining the 2 of the principles, the principle of lists and the principle of structures, and coming up with a pretty simple tool. I can give you another one. We have another great tool for evaluation. One of the things I've noticed about organizations is that they're willing to spend a whole lot of money up front, but not a whole lot of money measuring results. And so it's a pretty good idea usually to do an after-action review. What worked? What didn't work? What might we do next time? Well, a great tool to do that is a tool that I call GPS. Now we take the 2 columns that we had in the no wonder, we expand it by a column, you got 3 columns, G, P, and S. The G stands for good or great, the P stands for problematic, and the S stands for step-ups. So what we do is we take an event that occurred, an action that we did, a plan that we did, a sales meeting that we did, an idea even that we might have, and we put it through a GPS system. We can do it either by ourselves or with 1 or 2 or however many other people. And we make that nice long list of all the good stuff that, we were terrific here. We really succeeded there. And we put down a list of all the stuff that didn't go so well. We have to be kind of ego-free, and that's another sub-principle of this, and I'll get back to that when we talk about that deferred judgment thing that we talked about earlier. So put down all of the problematic issues. And then finally we take a look at that S for step-ups, and we go back to the good stuff and say, how might we step that up? How can we make it even better? We're not satisfied. So we start enhancing the good, and then we go to the problematic, and we say, well, how can we step that up? Well, how can we reduce or eliminate or even reverse a particular problem? So once again, 1 list times 3 columns, a bunch of people, and you have a really, really interesting way and a quick way of evaluating a process, a project, whatever it is. Then from that GPS, you use another tool, super simple, not about lists this time. What do I have to start doing? What do I have to stop doing? And what do I have to keep doing but do better? These are the kinds of things that, when you say them, seem, oh yeah, that's so obvious.
But nobody takes the time to do them.
Who does it? Who does it?
Exactly. It sounds like these are all tools that teams can get better at over time and can be really more productive. Even the first time you go through the listing exercise, it might be a little difficult, but then you kind of train to get better at it over time.
Yeah, it's true. I said earlier that this is, this is all simple stuff, and it is simple. It's simple to say, but when to put it in practice is much harder. Every major religion in the world has, some form of love thy neighbor. Pretty simple to say, right? It's 3 words.
Tricky, Howard.
But let's take a look at the world around us, and we know how hard that is to execute. So in the same way, this stuff is, simple to say, simple to conceptualize, but it is difficult. And there are a couple of reasons that it's difficult. One goes back to that principle that I haven't elaborated on yet, the principle of deferring of judgment. So we creatures are bred, in a sense, it's in our genes to evaluate our environment. You walk down the street and consciously or subconsciously you evaluate your environment. You're walking through the jungle. Is there danger here? Is there food there? We're constantly in this mode of, is it good? Is it bad? Is it going to be problematic? Is it going to be something I'm going to like? Pain, pleasure. Well, that's so deeply embedded in us that when somebody comes up, for example, with an idea about something, it doesn't matter what it's about, we will start to evaluate it before it's even finished being articulated. So it's either good, positive, or it's threatening, negative. And as the idea is articulated, we want to weigh in with our opinion. As a result of that, we often don't have the opportunity to make lists because we get stuck on the first thing we hear, say, well, that's not a particularly good idea. Or we could say, that's a great idea. It's not negative. It's all kinds of evaluation that are problematic. What they do is they prevent us from generating enough material to really think about it. So the analogy I like to use with regard to deferral of judgment is, imagine that you're, some ancient Fiji islander and you're paddling your outrigger canoe into the lagoon, and you know that there's an oyster bed out there, and you dive in for oysters. And so you dive in, grab an oyster, climb back up in your boat, take your shucking knife out, open the oyster, pearl or no pearl. Dive in again, another oyster. Back in the boat, shucking knife, open the oyster, pearl or no pearl. Well, let's say you can make 50 dives, that's 50 oysters, and whatever the chance is of finding a pearl. I have no idea what the numerical thing is, but it's probably not that high. So you get a couple of pearls. What if you decided to defer judgment? That is, don't open the oyster, but go down with a little bag and say, oyster, 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 swim up, don't even get into the boat, hurl the bag in, grab another bag, make the same 50 dives. Then when you come out of the water into the boat, you've got 50 bags full of oysters. And obviously, 50 bags times the number of opportunities to find those pearls. Are you going to come up with more than a couple of pearls? You are. It's almost exactly the same way when it comes to any kind of idea. And I'm not even talking about creative ideas. I'm talking about any idea. I'm going to have more quality ideas just by looking for more ideas.
Being open to that.
Being open. So part of that, because we talked earlier about this, one of the processes we talked about, the GPS process, is that you have to be ego-free, particularly when it comes to the problematic side.
Which is tough, yeah.
Ego is one of the factors that goes into judgment. This is threatening to me, to my self-esteem. So when you do a GPS, for example, you have to say, you know what? I'm going to put my ego on hold when somebody says, Tim, one of the problems was, and names the fact that I was late or that I was sloppy or whatever it happens to be. And unless I do that, that idea won't get onto the table sufficiently. I'll start arguing about it, and we'll actually lose focus completely. But wouldn't it be great if we did identify a problem that I had that could change the performance of the team and accelerate it way beyond what it was right now? So that's where this deferral of judgment. Now, deferral of judgment does not mean no judgment. What it means is grab all those resources, then revisit the resources afterwards, and now start making some choices. Now start making some evaluation. So the short form is make lists. That was one of the principles. Make choices. In that order. Make lists. Make choices. Do that one simple principle with every list that you do. You'll have more ideas, more performance, better performance, guaranteed 100% of the time.
Tim concludes his discussion in part 2 of this episode. Check out the other podcast episodes in this series to learn more from Microsoft Partner Network thought leaders. Keep in touch with us via LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube by searching for the Microsoft Partner Network. And be sure to follow us on Twitter with the handle @MSPartner. And if you like the podcast, don't forget to rate and review it.